Hey everyone, and welcome to Project Opioid JAX Community Conversation webinar. My name is TJ Ward, and I am the director of Project Opioid JAX. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to the Florida Blue Foundation for sponsoring this webinar and for funding Project Opioid JAX. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule as well to join us here today. We know that your time is valuable, and so for the next hour, we want to share some things with you that we feel will make a huge difference as we fight this opioid crisis together. Because our time is limited, we have a lot to cover today. I'm going to jump right in by letting you know what to expect during our time together. We're going to start by hearing from the co-chairs of our Project Opioid JAX Board of Directors, Daniel Davis and Darnell Smith. And that's going to be followed by a time where I answer a couple of questions you're probably wondering. And those are, what is Project Opioid? Why is the JAX Chamber facilitating this initiative? After that, we're going to hear a powerful story from a gentleman who lost his son less than a year ago to an opioid overdose. And that's going to be followed by a panel discussion with our guest contributors. And we'll answer the question, how will Project Opioid JAX make a difference? And then finally, we'll hear a closing statement from the founder and CEO of Project Opioid, Andre Bailey, who will spend the last couple of minutes wrapping up our webinar. Our first speaker today is Daniel Davis. Daniel was named JAX Chamber President and CEO in 2013. His focus on promoting business-friendly policy, growing an entrepreneurial culture, and reaching out to our entire community has led to significant membership increases during his tenure. Under Daniel's leadership, the JAX Chamber was one of 4 national finalists for the 2016 Chamber of the Year Award. Daniel previously served on the Jacksonville City Council and was elected president of the council in 2007, the youngest to ever serve in this capacity. He also served for 4 years in the State House of Representatives, representing District 15, which encompasses parts of Duval County. Daniel serves on the board of several local and statewide organizations, including Enterprise Florida, Space Florida, the St. Johns River Water Management District, First Coast YMCA, the Monique Burr Foundation, and Project Opioid JAX. So at this time, let's hear a brief welcome from Daniel Davis.
Hello, my name is Daniel Davis, and I'm the president and CEO of the JAX Chamber. It's my honor to welcome you to the Project Opioid webinar today. And we have great partners like Florida Blue and the JAX Chamber working together to fight an issue in every community that's hurting families and it's hurting cities. And we need to all band together to make sure that we're working hard to stop opioid abuse in every community. Do everything we can to let our businesses and our community leaders know how this is affecting the people that live in our community. So I'm honored to be here with you today. Thank you for being a part of the webinar, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.
Our next speaker is Darnell Smith. Darnell is Florida Blue's market president for the North Florida region. In his role, Smith is responsible for Florida Blue's business market growth, as well as customer and community engagement across 36 North Florida communities, covering cities from Palm Coast to Pensacola. Throughout his career, Smith has been extremely active in serving the community through numerous organization boards and councils, including United Way of Northeast Florida, First Coast YMCA, Sulzbacher Center, Communities and Schools Florida, Cathedral Arts Project, and Feeding Northeast Florida. Smith has demonstrated leadership in developing the community through numerous board appointments, including JAX Chamber, Economic Development Council of Tallahassee, the Flagler Board of Trustees, JAX USA Policy Council, Big Bend Minority Chamber of Commerce, and Project Opioid JAX. Let's hear from Darnell Smith.
Hello, I'm Darnell Smith, market president of North Florida at Florida Blue. Florida Blue has been supporting various initiatives to curb the opioid epidemic for a number of years. More than 3 years ago, we stopped covering the opioid OxyContin and replaced it with a new oxycodone formula developed specifically to help prevent abuse of the drug. We awarded grants to people like Dr. Christine Caufield for creating a training program for paraprofessionals in recovery from behavioral health disorders to contribute their lived experiences and hope for recovery to individuals affected by mental illness or substance abuse. Many are now serving local emergency rooms in Jacksonville. Florida Blue has worked to identify physicians whose opioid prescribing pattern raised concerns. We've also established case management programs related to opioid usage that focuses on member education and safety. We partnered with Project Opioid when it began in Central Florida a few years ago to fund programs and raise awareness about the epidemic of opioid overdoses and deaths in Florida. Now, with overdoses and deaths increasing during the pandemic, the Florida Blue Foundation is investing $1.7 million to support the Project Opioid initiative in communities throughout Florida, including Jacksonville. By launching regional coalitions across Florida, the foundation can support local needs as well as facilitate learning and collaboration among the coalitions to enhance the initiative's impact. Florida Blue is a mission-driven company, and our mission is to help people and communities achieve better health. That means taking the lead to find ways to decrease opioid overdoses and help those who are suffering to recover.
I want to thank both Daniel and Darnell for the significant investment they are making in this initiative on a personal level, as well as the resources JAX Chamber and Florida Blue and the Florida Blue Foundation are providing so that we can help reduce the number of overdose deaths that occur in North Florida. So what is Project Opioid? Project Opioid is a coalition of the top leaders within a community who come together to confront the overdose crisis. We are a statewide collaboration that's being implemented in 6 different regions. A grant awarded by the Florida Blue Foundation is funding this initiative in Florida's largest markets. And you can see on the screen, we have Orlando or Central Florida, Jacksonville, Tampa Bay, West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami. And although we are gathering leaders from all sectors within our community, Project Opioid emphasizes involvement from the business, faith, and philanthropic sectors. I want to highlight the diagram on this slide, the hub, if you will, and you can see on the hub, all sectors are represented, but within that, 3 of the circles are red. Those are the business, faith, and philanthropic leaders. And you may be thinking, why target business, faith, and philanthropic leaders specifically? Well, there's a few reasons for this. As we look across the overall landscape of opioid intervention in North Florida, it seems as though for whatever reason, these particular leaders are not being utilized in the conversation. And it's not because they don't care. In fact, it's the exact opposite. When they are informed about this crisis that we're dealing with, the overwhelming majority of these leaders feel compelled to get involved and to make a difference. These leaders have a unique perspective. They think differently, which in turn means they bring different possibilities to the table, which leads to different opportunities to make a difference. They have an unparalleled platform. They have built-in influence with captive audiences. If you think about it, business leaders have clients that they deal with every day and colleagues, co-workers that they can share this information with. And then as far as faith leaders are concerned, they have congregations that they speak to every single week. These leaders also possess a skill set that is characterized by problem solving. They find solutions to complex challenges. And then they're proactive. They get stuff done. And these are just a few of the reasons we believe it's vitally important to engage business, faith, and philanthropic leaders in our coalition. So far, we have 73 of the top leaders in our community from all different sectors within the Project Opioid JAX coalition. We have 11 business leaders, 20 faith leaders, 21 nonprofit leaders, 3 educational leaders, 13 government leaders, 3 criminal justice or public safety leaders, and then 2 philanthropic leaders. And I want to introduce you at this time to our executive board members. You've already met Daniel Davis and Darnell Smith, who are our co-chairs, but we also have on our board Mayor Lenny Curry, Sheriff Mike Williams, State Attorney Melissa Nelson, Fire Chief Keith Powers, City Councilman Ron Salem, Superintendent Dr. Diana Green, and then as faith leaders, we have Bishop Vaughn McLaughlin of the Potter's House International Ministries and Pastor Joby Martin of the Church of 1122. And we're extremely fortunate to have such incredible leaders assembled on our board, and I'm excited to work with them and their team in the days ahead. The next question I want to answer is, why is JAX Chamber facilitating this initiative? I don't want to start sharing statistics with you yet, because that's what part of our panel discussion is going to include, so I'll keep it simple. JAX Chamber is involved because people in our community are dying at an unprecedented rate, and we have the influence to make a difference. In addition to the lives that are being lost and ruined every single day by this epidemic, the overdose crisis is negatively impacting the business community in Jacksonville in significant ways, including the financial toll this unresolved issue is taking on companies from the smallest to the largest. At this time, I want to introduce you to someone who understands what I just described from both the professional and personal perspective. He's also been a part of JAX Chamber for over 10 years, participating in several different capacities. He's the president of Danis Construction, my friend, Steve Betts. Steve, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, TJ. Glad to be here today.
Yep. We know that you can speak to this from a professional standpoint, but you're here today to share strictly from a personal perspective. So before we get into that, can you please briefly describe your career up to this point, as well as your involvement with JAX Chamber over the years? Sure.
I've spent my entire career with Danis for the last 21 years. I have called Jacksonville our home. Danis is a commercial construction company. We do a significant amount of work in Jacksonville with a big emphasis on rebuilding our downtown. So we're pretty proud of that. And then with the Chamber for over 10 years, I started as a trustee, served on the board for a while. And after that, I've been part of a JAX USA member, been on the JAX Developers Downtown Council, and several downtown trips to try to improve our downtown. So I'm proud of the Chamber for taking this initiative. I'm proud of Florida Blue for taking this. It's impacting our community, our state, our region, and as a father and as a business leader, we need to do something, and we need to do something right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I want to say thank you for the significant investment you've made in our community on all levels, especially as it relates to JAX Chamber. Now, Steve, you recently lost your son, Tony, to an opioid overdose that was fentanyl related. How long ago did that occur, and how old was Tony?
We lost Tony on September the 30th of last year. Worst day of our lives. He was only 32. He had a 9-month-old son who he leaves behind. And I'm talking to you today because I don't want to see any other family member ever have to go through what me and my family have been through. So it's been tough, and it's senseless, and we need to make a change.
How would you describe Tony?
Well, Tony was our firstborn of four children. He's beautiful inside and out. He would pick a stranger out of a room and make him feel at home. He loved life. He was warm. Family meant everything to my son. he had faith in God, which gives me comfort because I know he's in heaven. And he was a patriot. He loved his country. He loved politics. And most of all, his greatest attribute was that Tony loved people.
We can clearly see Tony was a handsome man, and from your description of him, he had a lot going for him. When did you first notice Tony was struggling?
Yeah, I would say, well, when we first moved to Jacksonville, you know, he struggled to fit in a little bit and struggled with his grades, and that kind of affected his self-esteem, his self-confidence, and that, you know, continued through high school. We tried to get him help for his grades, as any parent would do, and then it kind of continued into college. He was introduced to pain pills by a so-called friend, and it escalated from there. Tony finally admitted to me in college that he had a problem, and as a parent, as a dad, you know, your first reaction is, I got to fix this thing. And I think what our greatest struggle was at that time was where to turn for help. What kind of help did we need? Where was the right help? How do we find the resources specific to this problem here? And it took us, you know, a long time to figure that out. And you know, in and out of rehab, in and out of detox, successes, failures, relapse. Tony struggled for about 12 years, and he fought every single day through this thing. This is nothing he wanted. So the biggest challenge we had was really finding the right help at the right time for my son.
I'm so sorry to hear that. I guess, Steve, my next question is related to the stigma that is often attached to those who battle opioid use disorder, or OUD. What have you found to be some misconceptions that people have about those who are experiencing OUD?
You know, that you might come from a dysfunctional family and you don't have love and support, and that, you know, if you wanted to stop, you could. I consider our family to be a great family. We're all very close. We have faith. We love each other. We always communicated. We always talked. I'm fortunate enough to have a good job where I could put my kids through college. And, you know, this stuff doesn't discriminate. It's not someone that, or something that goes to specific families or specific race, or it doesn't discriminate. And you know, that you know, Tony doesn't look like an addict. He you know, all I can say is it can come after everybody and anybody, and it has. And you know, people joke about drugs and crack and that kind of thing. And quite honestly, to my family and so many other families, it's no laughing matter. So.
Yeah, Steve, how did you see the type of stigma that you just described being expressed in relation to Tony's struggles? Well,
I think people are afraid of it because they don't understand it, you know, and people don't want to deal with it. It's your problem. I'm sorry you have that problem, but it won't affect my family. Friends were polite, but never really wanted to talk about it. The thought that these people just don't care about their families. And then as a parent, you know, my greatest failure was that I couldn't help my son get over this thing here. And as you met with friends that had families and kids your age, you're always comparing how are your kids doing? Where are they? And, you know, Greg, Tony, Landon, and Nikki, and it was always how they're progressing. But then Tony was always, you know, hey, he's struggling again. He's in rehab again, and it wasn't easy to talk about that stuff, and it was just kind of a measurement of how you were measuring up as a parent, as a father. And even though that wasn't a fair comparison, that was my reality at the time. So
I think it's safe to say that you probably speak on behalf of a lot of parents. I know you've talked with several who have been through what you've been through. Do they have a similar story? Do they have a similar scenario that you described?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've met so many people after going through what we've been through, and one gentleman I was introduced to, very similar circumstances to me, lost his son. And the one thing he said to me that resonated with me was, you know what, I'm so proud of how hard our sons fought, because they didn't want this, and most people don't. Tony told me one day he was sorry he was an embarrassment to our family. You know, has any child ever told anybody listening today that, and how do you react to that? So, you know, what's being done about fentanyl being on our streets? To me, there seems to be very little going on. I've met so many people that have been through such a painful and unnecessary experience. Like I said earlier, the most difficult thing was learning where to find help. I want to raise awareness. I don't want to sit on the sideline and do nothing. Tony wouldn't do that. He'd be the first to jump in there and do something for his fellow brother. So we need to fight. We need to fight for our families. We need to fight for our community and our families. And so, you know, I'm proud of my son. I'm proud of the chamber. I'm proud of the Florida Blue Foundation for funding this thing. So I'm your greatest fan, Chamber and Florida Blue. You know, let's do something about this. As Joby Martin, the lead pastor from the Church of 1122, always says, who's your one more? So who's our one more? Who can we save? How can we help you? And let's think about that every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we wrap up this time together, is there anything else that you would like to emphasize to our viewers today?
No, I think I've said it all. I just, it's a situation that I think is completely out of control. And once again, the toll that was put on our family and all other families is immeasurable for the last 12 years. And let's stop the craziness. Let's stop the madness, and let's save lives out there.
Yeah. Steve, I can't say thank you enough for coming on today and sharing your journey and sharing Tony's story and what a great young man he was, and everything that you experienced throughout his struggle. I know your heart is to help people who are in similar situations, and I count it an honor to have you as a part of our coalition at Project Opioid JAX, and look forward to working with you on this in the days to come. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thanks, TJ. Thank you. Glad to be here today and glad to be part of this great panel.
So what you heard there is exactly why Project Opioid JAX exists. Ultimately, we want to save lives. We want to help reduce the number of overdose deaths that are being experienced in North Florida. And so we're going to transition into our panel discussion at this time. I want to briefly introduce our guest contributors, and let me just say their bios are much larger and longer than what I'm going to share with you, but for sake of time, I'm just going to share a little bit about them so that you have some context of who you're hearing from. So our first contributor is Dr. Christine Caufield. She is the Chief Executive Officer of LSF Health Systems. She's the Executive Vice President of the Department of Children and Families Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health. Dr. Caufield received her doctorate degree in clinical psychology from Florida Institute of Technology and completed her postdoctoral residency at Harvard Medical School. Due to her extensive knowledge and experience related to critical healthcare initiatives, Dr. Caufield has been appointed to serve on the White House National Drug Control Policy Advisory Panel to present recommendations related to substance use disorder for President Biden's drug control strategy. Our next contributor is Mark Rowley. He is the Assistant Chief of Information Services for the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department. Mark Rowley is a paramedic, firefighter, and a nurse with over 28 years of experience in hospital response, including 6 years as a U.S. Coast Guard corpsman. As an Assistant Chief with the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department, he provides direct support for drug overdose prevention efforts, such as Project Save Lives and the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Project. And our final contributor today is Kathleen Roberts. She is the Executive Director of Community Coalition Alliance. Kathleen has worked in the field of substance use disorder prevention for over 15 years. Prior to her role as Executive Director of CCA, she was the clinical team lead at the Department of Children and Families Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, and served as the SAM clinical team lead, as well as Florida's National Prevention Network designee. Welcome to each of you, and thank you for lending us your expertise here this morning. Let's get started by discussing the severity of this epidemic within the pandemic. We all know that America was already facing a tragic overdose crisis that was fueled by opioids before the pandemic began. But then COVID-19 hit and swept across our nation in the spring of 2020, and the overdose crisis drastically changed for the worse. Dr. Caufield, first question's for you. Can you describe how the unintended consequences of the pandemic have contributed to the spike in overdose deaths during the last 15 months? I think you might be muted, Dr. Caufield.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, TJ. As many of us know in the field, over 80% of individuals that have opioid use disorder or any other type of substance use disorders also have a co-occurring mental health challenge. And this pandemic, as you strongly stated, has really impacted our mental health as well as our substance use during this pandemic. And so many, many people became extremely depressed, very anxious, very isolated, with nowhere to turn, no connection or interaction. And for those that were struggling with opioid use disorder, they often felt very alone, not connected to family or anyone that could observe that they may be struggling or spiraling downward. There was no one there to administer Narcan if needed. And so we've really seen an impact in the overdose situation, not only in our state, in our community, but our country as a result. And with that depression, the anxiety, many people also have co-occurring bipolar, all the mental health disorders were really, symptoms were exacerbated. Many people picked up to self-medicate, and so that really added to the issue of overdose in our community, in our state, in our country.
Man, so many factors at play and such a complex situation to address. I want to turn to Kathleen for the next question. Statistics suggest 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 10, depending on which sources you look at, employees struggle with an illicit drug or alcohol addiction. In the case of Duval County, this cost the business community no less than $220 million each year. What can business leaders do to help reduce opioid addictions and opioid-related overdose deaths?
Thank you so much for that. And we're so excited to have these kinds of conversations happening, because one thing that we are realizing as the crisis continues to expand and reach more of our community, impacting families, is that it's going to take all of us to be a part of that solution. Every part of our community, every sector represented, we all play a role. And what that role looks like is a little bit different. But for businesses, one of the things that we can start with is changing the conversation. Substance use disorder is a preventable and treatable illness. And so if we can make it easier for people to reach out for help and make it okay to ask for help, to ask for assistance, that will go a long way. There are a number of things that we can also do in reviewing policies within your different companies, looking to see if we are giving the message that aligns with the policies. So if we're saying it is okay to ask for help, but we don't have good policies in place that would allow that would allow your employees to look to see what kinds of assistant programs exist, what can some of the insurances cover, then we're not making what we're saying to equal what we're doing. So offering opportunities of that. Also being able to offer training and education opportunities. There's a lot of work that's done to provide education to the management level, as well as throughout the company. So this is yet another topic that will help to increase that awareness, and also to talk about what are some things that we can do to be helpful to our employees. Where do we direct them for services, for assistance, for supports? And doing things that we can do to support wellness, to promote the policies that enhance overall wellness, self-care, support long-term recovery, and then make sure that as we're having those conversations, we're addressing the issue around stigma, and not just to throw the term around. We know stigma has become very popular to say, to use, that we're working towards it, but if we're not actually making those changes, then it's just another term that's used. So making that help accessible, encouraging our employees to use health insurance or employee assistance programs, and then also offer up resources to make available for your employees. One of the other things in this conversation for changing stigma is making things available like Narcan. Wouldn't it be nice that that is a life-saving product that should be included in like your safety kits within your office? Once that becomes normalized in our conversation, it opens up the door for a lot of different things. So between policies and those actions and making sure they align together, that's a great first step.
Yeah. And you heard Steve talk about stigma and what a real struggle it is for those who are going through this and their family members. And so I'm with you on the stigma thing. We definitely need to kind of crush that, but really make what we do match what we say. So thank you for sharing those things. Chief Rowley, you meticulously, I haven't seen anything like it. It's amazing. You meticulously track overdose data for the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Departments. What is the most alarming statistic or group of statistics that you've seen in relation to the overdose crisis in Duval County since the beginning of 2020 or even further back?
Thank you, TJ. I just want to make sure, are you able to see my screen here? Am I in the presenter view or the regular view here?
You're in the presenter view.
All right. Not in the view you want. All right. Let me get out of that real quick. My apologies here. Let me just turn it off there. All right. Are you seeing it? Let me go back to that. And we practiced this, didn't we?
We did. That's okay. Technology is tricky sometimes.
Where's my screen? I'll just go over here to screen one for you. All right.
Slideshow.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to find here. And it keeps tricking up on me. So let's go back to it. And all right, you able to see it there?
We're good now.
All right.
Sure, thank you.
So hearing about statistics and numbers, the one thing I want to make sure is that behind every statistic, there's a face, there's a human, there's a person, there's a family, there's grieving friends and family. So, and I do not want to underscore that, or I don't want to diminish that by just throwing out numbers. So the numbers here are from the Duval County Medical Examiner. And last year we had 556 drug-related deaths here in Duval County. And here on this slide, you'll see opioid-related overdose incidents. And this is as our paramedics and firefighters respond and document certain things that they find on scene and or clinical impressions of the patient. And you'll see here that we had about a 26% increase in our opioid-related responses over last year, almost 3,500. And if you look at that 2014, 2015, I was a little concerned about the data. You know, is that spike? Maybe my data set was inaccurate. But when I compare it with national trends, here's a graph from the CDC. It also shows that there was a huge spike in 2014, 2015, and then going on into 2016. So our data is consistent with what we're seeing nationally. Jacksonville is not alone. So here's a map. Just over the past 12 months, where have our drug-related incidences been? Our 911 calls for, this is opioids right here on the screen. The blue dots are the opioids. And what I'm going to ask just for a moment is there's about 77 people on this call. Find where you live. Find where you work. If you're the CEO, find your company and see where this is. And as you know, Steve said, this doesn't discriminate. Here are all other drug-related responses, and this includes alcohol as well, if a substance was the primary reason for the 911 call, as documented by our paramedics. And then something of very concern is here's our roadways. These are incidences just in the past 12 months of a drug-related incident or overdose on a roadway. 18% of our overdose responses are now on roadways. And I am not trying to be funny, but here's a sign. I don't know how to say it anymore, but this is a public health crisis. Aside from family crisis, this is absolutely impacts us all. Another concern that we are seeing in that property is we're seeing the decrease in residents, the increase in roadways, and we are seeing a decrease in healthcare facilities as far as property type. Of concern, we are seeing an increase in some hotels, and we do work with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office to try to remedy those. And we've also provided Narcan to security guards who patrol the hotels, and we've already had documented lives saved at hotels. Here is the age range. We are seeing an uptick in the age, the range of 20 to 49. It is increasing. In gender, we are seeing an increase in our opioid patients. The male population is increasing, females generally decreasing. And of concern as well, in the African American community, we've had it's 100% increase. We've gone from 8% in 2014. We're now at 16% of our opioid-related patients or overdose patients are Black or African American. And commiserately, we are seeing the decrease in white population. So, and even in the Hispanic, Latinos, so in the minority communities, this is increasing. And again, at-risk substance use does not discriminate. So that concludes the slides right there. So I'm going to stop sharing. And we are just what Kathleen said about the Narcan. We are pushing very hard and working with you, TJ, on that. And also, we've been a strong ally of Dr. Caufield and JU and getting her work with the peers, you know, that Darnell spoke of. We're doing our best, and we need more. And I know there'll be a question at the very end about what else can we do. But thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that data. And one of the things we say at Project Opioid is Narcan anywhere and everywhere. We'll let you speak to that, you know, here at the end. I want to go back to Dr. Caufield, and this is a two-part question for you, Dr. Caufield. When it comes to opioid use disorder, what kind of treatment options are generally covered by insurance?
Great question. And normally both inpatient, detox, and outpatient services are covered, as well as medication assistant treatment, or methadone. Many are finding very, very good results by shifting from the opioid onto methadone that allows people to hold down jobs, to get their children back from the child welfare system if they've been taken from them, and to enjoy healthy and productive lives. So there are alternatives. There are many treatments for this disorder, and insurance pays for them, as well as the state. So if you are not insured, underinsured, Indigent, we have treatment facilities that are able to accommodate you for your treatment as well. In fact, that's what we do at LSF Health Systems. We manage a network of over 60 provider organizations in 23 counties, or a third of the state. Some of them here in town are Gateway, River Region, Child Welfare and Child Guidance Center, and many, many others that we work with that will provide the treatments needed for those that are indigent, uninsured, and need a place to receive the much needed treatment and services.
Yeah, so you mentioned the uninsured and underinsured. What other types of services are available besides those you mentioned in relation to that population?
Absolutely. We also have a housing division. So if people are struggling, don't know where they're going to live tonight, possibly at risk for homelessness, we have a housing division that also assists individuals to find appropriate placements, because we know that if you are in treatment and you are diligently trying to meet your treatment goals, but you have no place to live, that is going to impact your ability to really concentrate and focus on those treatment goals. So we make sure to address the social determinants of health, including housing, nutrition, other treatment opportunities, drop-in centers, peer supportive services, so that individuals that are moving toward recovery have the resources they need to be successful. We find, especially with the certified peer recovery specialist, that those individuals with lived experience that wrap their arms around individuals that are struggling and wanting to move toward recovery, we find very, very good outcomes, because they have an individual certified recovery peer specialist that has lived their life. They have been in their shoes, and they are able to share those lived experiences, be a motivator and an example that recovery is possible and that individuals can move forward and live very healthy and productive lives.
Right. And as you know, Dr. Caufield, I'm fairly new to this discussion, this conversation, but what I've learned is peer support specialists provide a tremendous amount of support to those who are struggling and going through this. And as you know, Project Save Lives, our city council task force that Mark is heavily involved in, is doing such an incredible job in that area. So we're grateful for their effort in that regard. So thank you for sharing that information with us. I want to follow up with Kathleen and ask you about fentanyl. So fentanyl it's becoming a more recognizable term, even with people that don't have extreme knowledge of what we're talking about. They hear that term and it makes sense to them. They know what it means to a certain degree. But can you explain to our viewers what fentanyl actually is and what part it is playing in this increase of overdose deaths?
Absolutely. So yes, you're right. That term fentanyl is becoming more known across our different community partners and conversations just because of its prevalence. So fentanyl is a powerful synthetic opioid, very similar to, say, morphine, the difference being it is 50 to 100 times more potent. So it does have a medical component to it. So there is a medical use for it. There's the medical grade that's used to treat patients with severe pain, especially after surgery. It comes in a shot, a patch that you can put on the skin, or even lozenges. But what we're talking about when we think of fentanyl, it's the illegal substance, the stuff that's being made in the labs that can come in powder form, dropped into a blotter paper, put into eyedroppers, nasal sprays, made into pills that look like prescription opioids. So those are the pieces that we're talking about here. And fentanyl works by binding to the body's opioid receptors, which are found in the areas of the brain that control pain and emotions. It is extremely addictive because of its potency. It's become more widely available. It's is used commonly to cut as a cutting agent for other substances. So we're seeing it coming across in the cocaine, methamphetamine, and even at times with marijuana. We've seen significant increases in seizures with having fentanyl. And because of that lethal aspect of it, it's now becoming one of the top drug threats that we have. Each month here in Duval, we meet for our drug epidemiology network, and we bring together our different partners to look at what is happening here in the Jacksonville area. What are those trends looking like? We know the opioid crisis is happening in Florida and across our country, but it looks a little different in every community. And even here within our community, we've been able to see some variations when we look into the different health zones, looking down to see which areas are being hit hardest, so we can figure out what are some of those resources that we can bring in. How can we connect different partners at the table? Fentanyl is becoming such an issue that this, for the first time this year in the medical examiner's interim report, it is the top substance noted. It usually is alcohol year after year, but now we're seeing fentanyl being that number one, and it's causing huge issues, not just in our state, but here locally as well.
Yeah, it's as I talk to people who like Steve, who've lost those close to them, it almost always involves fentanyl. Just in the amount of people that are overdosing and dying as a result is just off the charts because of this synthetic opioid. So, Chief Rowley, from your perspective, what are some of the greatest challenges we face in our community as we continue to confront this crisis? You're muted, Chief.
All right, thank you. So I believe one of the biggest challenges is compassion fatigue. And I own that for myself. You know, having a lot of experience being out there, repeat exposure as a healthcare provider, even working as a nurse in addiction medicine, it's easy for me to become jaded, to be judgmental. And what I have to constantly tell myself is I really believe that our 1,600 firefighters, the men and women of Jacksonville Fire Rescue, we are in the business of giving people a second chance, even if it's for the 4th, 5th, or 10th time. And we need not forget that. And I really believe that the 75 people on this call, I believe you're there with us to give everybody a second chance and to speak that hope into people that suffer with at-risk substance use. And to what Steve said about what, you know, Pastor Joby said, you know, who is our one more? And that to me speaks to compassion fatigue as a dangerous agent that we need to be aware of. Harm reduction is going to be another challenge that we have. Quite frankly, abstinence is not yet in everybody's vocabulary. And there are many people that suffer with at-risk substance use that their dependency, their bodies, for whatever reason, they're not yet ready or able to choose abstinence. And while we have Project Save Lives and many other programs that are there for people that are ready, what about those that aren't? And so the city is looking and working with city council. I know we have some city council members on this call, and thank you, to address those things that we can do to bridge people and meet them where they're at and connect them into recovery. So, and there's a lot of data and stats that show that actually most harm reduction programs really result in a 5-fold increase in getting people into long-term recovery. Another challenge that we have that Kathleen spoke about is stigma. So again, I'm guilty. I'm guilty of wanting to slam a bunch of Narcan and think, oh, that'll wake them up, that'll teach them. And that's just not compassionate. So, I want to remind, based on the stats that you provided, TJ, between 20 and 10%. So right now on this call, and there's a lot of powerhouses on this call. I'm seeing you and I know we're chatting, but right now, just with us, 75 folks, between 7 or 8 and 15 of us right now, statistically, may struggle with at-risk substance use or chemical dependency. And that is humbling to me and keeps me motivated. And what Kathleen spoke about is about the employers. And I'm excited and would ask that employers go back today and meet with your HR person and review your policies and ask yourself, what are you doing to create an environment where your employees can talk about their real issues? What are you doing to encourage your employees to get help, to get MAT, or to maybe attend an AA meeting instead of going to lunch? There we go. That's what I got.
Yeah, thank you. I know our hope is that, with employers especially, that those conversations can start. They're not going to solve the issues right away, but if we can start those conversations and keep making progress in this area, then everybody's going to benefit from that. And you mentioned real quickly, and we're kind of under a little bit of a time crunch, but if you could speak to Chief Rowley, MAT and the different forms of that, just real quick, what are they? And we don't have time to go into the details of them, but just to kind of put that out there, what is MAT briefly, and what are the different options that exist in regards to that?
Yeah, so MAT, or medication-assisted treatment or therapy, and I'm going to invite Dr. Caufield to speak in this too, but generally you have the most common are going to be a methadone, buprenorphine, or Subutex, and Vivitrol. One of the most common is buprenorphine for opioid addiction. Vivitrol is often used for alcohol, and methadone is also used for opioids. We have some providers here on the call that are actually some of the largest MAT providers in the city, and it is basically harm reduction. We're taking people out of chaotic, dangerous use where that one fake Xanax is actually fentanyl and will kill them. We're taking people that are using heroin, fentanyl, carfentanyl, things that are killing them in seconds, and saying, hey, let's manage your use through methadone. Let's manage your use through microdosing, through buprenorphine. And basically, these drugs, a lot of them also have Narcan that prevents an overdose and or makes the patient feel very nauseous and uncomfortable if they take a street drug with it. And so that's by design. And these medications, they basically sit on that mu receptor site, that opioid receptor site, satiate the brain, take away the craving, take away withdrawals. And the goal for MAT truly is tapering. And there are a lot of patients, depending on who you talk to, will say, hey, I've been on it for years in life. And there's others that I've known that are tapering it off and been off of it for only a short time. So
I think it's important to note as well that everybody is different. Everybody's made, has a different chemical makeup with regard to their physiology. And so whatever works is what is right, I think. And so we don't have time to go into that conversation, but I do want to invite you, Dr. Caufield. Do you have anything to add to that in relation to what he said?
No, I just want to echo the fact that sometimes there's stigma around taking methadone, for example. Some people will say, well, you're just substituting one drug for another. Yet from all the benefits that Mark shared, stopping that craving cycle, allowing individuals to move forward with their lives, get their kids back, hold down a productive job, that is far more beneficial than the previous drug usage that they were engaged in. So I think that we need to not be judgmental around these alternative modalities. They are certainly best practice in the field and saving so many lives.
Yeah. Yes, and something that Kathleen, we spoke about, TJ, and a concern for a lot of MAT patients are that they will pop positive. So if you're an employer and you're doing a drug screen, know that your employee who's on MAT, physician prescribed, will pop positive. And again, I just encourage employers to go back and look and make sure that you have a policy that doesn't disenfranchise or discourage that, and encourages your employee to be honest. So, and also a lot of the methadone clinics, they're open early. They're 5 in the morning. So if your employee needs to swing by at 5 or 6 in the morning to get their methadone, I ask that you accommodate.
Well, thank you all for being a part of this webinar. Your insight and expert opinions have been extremely valuable and beneficial, and Project Opioid JAX is honored to partner with you in this work. We're grateful to have you as a part of our coalition. and we look forward to helping solve this crisis in the days ahead. So thank you all for being with us. So as we prepare to wrap up today, I want to answer one more question, and that is, how will Project Opioid make a difference? We believe that we have a framework that works, and we didn't create all of these things, but we've been able to assemble them in a way that we feel is effective. And I just want to go through those with you really quickly. One of them is to align cross-sector leaders. I mentioned building a coalition. That's what we've been doing for the first 3 months of the existence of Project Opioid JAX. We've been focusing on learning the landscape of the opioid intervention scene in Jacksonville and Duval County, and building an alliance of leaders as a foundation for future success. And I want to take time to thank those of you who are in our coalition who are viewing today. We're so grateful that you have decided to come alongside us and be a part of what we're going to be doing in the days ahead to really address and confront this overdose crisis. Another thing we want to do is educate and increase awareness. I think you heard from the panel how much that is needed, how important that is. As I've learned about this issue over the last several months, I've found that as I talk with people, they usually fall into one of two categories when it comes to this. Either they know it very well, like Steve, who was with us earlier, who unfortunately lost his son to an overdose, or they're in the other category, which is they know about it, but they don't really know the significant impact that it's making and the loss that it is resulting in. And so we just want to bring awareness. I can speak for our coalition and just let you know that 70% of the individuals in our coalition weren't currently engaged in the conversation before they joined with Project Opioid JAX. So we're so grateful to have them as a part of what we're doing to make a difference. And we want to continue to increase awareness and get more people involved. And then we want to create and share data. We feel it's important to have a needs assessment that's going to identify the most vulnerable populations so that we can meet the most pressing needs. The Project Opioid framework is meant to be reproducible, but it is also flexible. And what I mean by that is we have the ability to contextualize to our community's greatest needs and our leaders' greatest strengths, and that's what we intend to do. And then we want to formulate high-impact strategies. So after the official launch of Project Opioid JAX on August 31st, which is also International Overdose Awareness Day, we will begin strategically gathering our coalition of leaders. We're going to determine the most effective solutions given the data, the needs, and our strengths, and then we're going to create action steps that are going to drive change and save lives. And then we want to advocate and coordinate. We want to advocate for frontline leaders and service providers. There are so many good organizations, good people already doing this work. There are people that wake up every single day and think about how they can solve this problem. And we just want to come alongside them and help make a difference, get more people involved, advocate for those who are effectively engaged in the work, and help them get more resources, more funding so they can continue to do what they do at an even greater level. And then we want to advocate for those who don't have access to resources and treatment, those who are underserved and vulnerable populations. And then we want to coordinate with like-minded stakeholders. We want to coordinate our efforts so that we can force multiply our impact. And those are some ways that we will help reduce the number of overdose deaths in Duval County in the days to come. So as we wrap up, once again, I want to thank the Florida Blue Foundation for their investment in Project Opioid. I want to say a special thank you to Velma Montero Tribble, who I know is watching. Thank you, Velma, for your support and all of the help that you've provided for me personally in this and for Project Opioid JAX. And I want to say thank you to you who are tuning in today. Thank you for giving us an hour of your time. I would love for you to email me if you're interested in getting involved. If you have other questions, my email information is going up on the screen and you can write that down. I would love to have a conversation with you about how you can get involved, how you can make a difference. And then one last question we want to answer before we let you go is, where do we go from here? And to answer that question, we're going to have Andre Bailey, who is the founder and CEO of Project Opioid. Some of you will probably recognize him from his work with homelessness across the country. and he's very involved in that and has done a tremendous job of making a difference in that area. But I want him to speak specifically to, you know, where we go from here as it relates to Project Opioid and Project Opioid JAX. So Andre, thanks for joining us today.
TJ, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay? Wonderful. So everyone, I know we're out of time, so I'm going to take 60 seconds to just tell you one more time this. When you look at this chart here, you can see it in my screen. Overdoses are up around Florida and in Jacksonville. They're skyrocketing because of all these factors coming together, accelerated by the pandemic. But you got to reach out today and get a hold of TJ. I want you right now to write that TJ's number down again. Hey, Amber, put TJ's number back up there, please. Amber's our coordinator of the webinar. She's behind the scenes making it. Write TJ's number down right now, his email. I want you to hear these stories. You heard Tony's story. I want to encourage you to hear the data through the lens of lives lost right now, and let that motivate you to get off the sidelines and get involved in this important issue in Jacksonville. If someone is watching this, you're not from Jacksonville, we can connect you with another Project Opioid, but you have the ability to save lives by becoming a hero for those who are in need in your community, who are deserving of our help. So thank you, Florida Blue Foundation. Thank you to all the leaders. TJ, I'll let you say goodbye to everybody.
Thank you, Andre. Thanks for tuning in today. Thank you to those of you who were contributors for the webinar here today. We look forward to working with you in the days ahead. We will make a difference in this area. We will help reduce the amount of overdose deaths in Duval County, and we would love for you to be a part of it. Just like Andre said, you can be a hero by getting involved. So email me. I can't wait to talk to you. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.